Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss any more life-changing content like this. Today, I'm going to share something that will revolutionize your social interactions forever. This isn't just another communication hack. This is the master key to getting anyone to reach out to you, almost like you've cast a spell on them. Let me start with a question. Have you ever stared at your phone, willing it to ring? Have you ever sent a message and then obsessively checked for a reply? We've all been there, whether it's waiting for a potential employer, a love interest, or even a friend who's gone distant. That feeling of powerlessness can be overwhelming. But what if I told you that you could flip the script? What if you could become the person others can't wait to call? I discovered this technique by accident during one of the darkest periods of my life. I was isolated, disconnected, and frankly desperate for human connection. My relationships were falling apart, my career was stagnating, and I couldn't figure out why nobody seemed interested in maintaining contact with me. It was as if I had become invisible. That experience shook me to my core, forcing me to examine myself and my interactions with brutal honesty. What I realized was profound yet simple. The way we communicate signals our value to others. It's not about manipulation or psychological tricks. It's about understanding the fundamental nature of human connection. When I implemented this technique, the results were immediate and astounding. People who hadn't reached out in months suddenly called me. Business contacts who had gone cold were eager to reconnect. The change was so dramatic that I initially thought it was coincidence. But it wasn't coincidence, it was cause and effect. And today, I'm going to share that exact technique with you. Now I need you to pay close attention because what I'm about to share isn't complicated, but it is nuanced. The power lies in the execution and your commitment to the process. At its core, this technique leverages what I call the void principle. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the human mind. When we create a certain kind of void in our communication, others feel compelled to fill it. But this isn't about playing hard to get or using silence as a weapon. Those tactics might work temporarily, but they don't create genuine connection, and they certainly don't last. The technique begins with understanding your current communication patterns. Most of us unintentionally signal neediness or desperation in subtle ways we're not even aware of. We send messages that are too long, too frequent, or too emotionally charged. We reveal our anxiety through our words, our timing, even our punctuation. And others can sense this, even if they can't articulate why they feel reluctant to respond. So the first step is a communication audit. Pull out your phone right now. Look at the last 10 messages you sent to someone important in your life. Are they paragraphs when a sentence would do? Are you double or triple texting before getting a response? Are you ending every sentence with an exclamation point or question mark signaling emotional intensity? These patterns broadcast insecurity, and insecurity repels rather than attracts. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about communicating with intention and self-respect. It's about recognizing that your time, your energy, and your attention are valuable resources, and treating them as such teaches others to value them too. The second component of this technique involves what I call value-forward communication. Every interaction should provide value, whether that's information, insight, humor, or emotional support. But here's the critical part. The value must be genuine and it must be offered without an explicit expectation of immediate return. Let me give you a concrete example. Instead of sending a generic, "Hey, how are you?" text that puts the conversational burden on the other person, send something specific that shows you've been thinking about them in a non-intrusive way. Something like, "Saw this article about sustainable architecture and immediately thought of your project. No need to respond, just thought you'd find it interesting." Then include the link and leave it at that. What you've done is provided value, relevant information, shown attentiveness, you remembered their interest, and most crucially, removed pressure by explicitly saying no response is needed. You've created a void that feels good to fill, not one that feels like an obligation. But here's where most people go wrong. They can't maintain the discipline this technique requires. They send the value-forward message, but then undermine it with a follow-up an hour later asking, "Did you see what I sent?" Or they become visibly upset when their approach doesn't yield immediate results. Remember, this isn't about a single interaction. It's about consistently demonstrating your value over time. The third element of this technique involves leveraging what psychologists call the peak end rule. Our brains don't remember experiences in their entirety. They disproportionately weight the most intense moment, the peak, and the final moment, the end. By deliberately structuring your interactions to have positive peaks and ends, you leave a much stronger impression. In practice, this means ending conversations at high points rather than letting them fizzle out. It means being the one to gracefully exit while the energy is still positive. Most people make the mistake of trying to extract every last drop from an interaction, leaving the other person feeling drained rather than energized. I once coached a client who couldn't understand why his networking efforts weren't leading to callbacks. When we analyzed his approach, I discovered he was cornering people at events and talking until they physically started backing away. He was ending interactions at their lowest point. Once he learned to conclude conversations while they were still engaging, even if he had more to say, his callback rate tripled. Now, let's talk about the psychological principle of scarcity. Things that are abundant decrease in perceived value. Things that are scarce increase in perceived value. Your time and attention should never be positioned as unlimited resources that are freely available to anyone at any time. That doesn't mean being artificially unavailable. It means having genuine boundaries that reflect your priorities and commitments. When I implemented this in my own life, I stopped immediately responding to every message, not because I was playing games, but because I started batching my communications into specific times of day so I could be fully present in my other activities. An unexpected consequence? People began valuing my responses more. They paid more attention to what I said because my communication became more intentional and focused. The fourth component of this technique involves what I call curiosity loops. Human beings are naturally curious creatures. When our curiosity is activated, we feel a powerful drive to satisfy it. By deliberately creating open loops in your communication, introducing ideas or stories that aren't fully resolved, you create a natural desire for continuation. This isn't about being manipulative or withholding information. It's about understanding the natural rhythm of engaging storytelling and conversation. Great communicators have always known that linear, completely explicit communication is rarely as engaging as communication that leaves room for the imagination and invites participation. In practice, this might mean sharing the beginning of an interesting experience, but saving the conclusion for your next interaction. It might mean asking a thoughtful question that requires reflection rather than an immediate answer. The key is that you're creating a reason for the conversation to continue, a thread that begs to be picked up. I implemented this with a potential business partner who had gone cold after our initial meeting. Instead of sending another follow-up asking for a decision, I shared an insight about our industry that directly related to our previous conversation, ending with, "This made me think about an alternative approach to the challenge we discussed. I'm refining the idea and would be interested in your thoughts when you have time." 2 hours later, my phone rang. The curiosity loop was too compelling to ignore. Now, here's where we need to address a common misconception. Many people believe that being super able, upon-able, and responsive demonstrates reliability and interest. In limited contexts, that's true, but in the broader psychological landscape of human interaction, constant availability can actually signal a lack of status and demand. Think about it. Who's more difficult to get a meeting with, an entry-level employee or a CEO? The person whose time is highly valued by others is, by definition, less available. By thoughtfully structuring your availability, you're not playing games. You're accurately signaling your value and the demands on your time. This brings us to the fifth element of the technique, pattern interruption. The human brain is constantly creating predictions based on observed patterns. When those patterns are interrupted in unexpected but positive ways, it creates a state of heightened attention and memorability. If all your communications follow the same format and timing, they become background noise. But when you occasionally deviate from your established patterns in thoughtful ways, you immediately become more interesting. This could be as simple as using a different communication medium, calling instead of texting, sending a voice memo instead of an email, or even, and this might sound radical in our digital age, sending a handwritten note. I tested this with a mentor relationship that had become routine. Instead of our usual email exchange, I sent a short video message addressing a question he'd asked in our last interaction. The response was immediate. This is exactly why I enjoy our conversations. You always bring a fresh perspective. The content of my message wasn't drastically different from what I might have written, but the format change created renewed engagement. The sixth component is what I term preemptive value recognition. Most people wait until they need something to recognize the value others provide. This creates a transparent transactional dynamic that feels inauthentic. By acknowledging and appreciating others' contributions before you need anything, you establish a reservoir of goodwill that feels genuine because it is genuine. In practice, this means regularly acknowledging the insights, efforts, or support others provide without immediately following up with a request. It means sending a message that says, I was reflecting on our last conversation and your point about X really shifted my thinking. I've been approaching the situation differently as a result, and it's already paying dividends. Thank you for that perspective. Full stop. No, and by the way, could you also help me with why? When I started implementing this aspect of the technique, I worried it might seem strange or out of character, but the responses I received were overwhelmingly positive. People aren't used to receiving recognition that doesn't immediately precede a request. It stands out precisely because it's rare. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, authenticity. None of these techniques work if they're applied mechanically or with manipulative intent. People are remarkably adept at detecting inauthenticity, even if they can't immediately identify what feels off. The magic happens when these principles align with your genuine intent to create meaningful connections. That's why I prefer to think of this as a communication framework rather than a trick or hack. It's about creating the conditions for genuine connection by removing the obstacles we unintentionally place in the way. It's about communicating in a manner that respects both yourself and others. Let me share a personal transformation that resulted from this approach. For years, I maintained a friendship that felt increasingly one-sided. I was always initiating, always accommodating, always available, and despite my efforts, the connection felt increasingly hollow. When I finally implemented these principles, communicating with intention, respecting my own time, providing value without expectation, something remarkable happened. Initially, there was silence. The pattern had been disrupted, and my friend didn't immediately adjust. But after about 2 weeks, I received a call. I've been thinking about you, she said. I realize I've been taking our friendship for granted. That conversation became the foundation for a much healthier, more balanced relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than habitual dynamics. This brings us to the seventh element, the power of earned absence. There's a profound difference between disappearing without explanation and stepping back after clearly communicating your intentions. When you demonstrate consistency and reliability, then communicate a temporary reduction in availability for a specific purpose, you often create a heightened appreciation for your presence. This isn't about manufacturing false scarcity. It's about having a life of purpose that sometimes requires focused attention. When I needed to complete an important project, I messaged my core circle. I'm diving deep into this work for the next week and will be minimally available. Looking forward to reconnecting after. The response was universal support, and interestingly, when I reemerged, my inbox was full of people eager to connect. The eighth component involves what I call conversational threading. Most superficial communications exist in isolation, a question, an answer, end of interaction. Deeper connections are built through conversations that reference and build upon previous exchanges, creating a sense of continuity and growing understanding. In practice, this means deliberately referring back to previous conversations, following up on stories or situations the other person has shared, and creating a narrative through line that extends beyond single interactions. You mentioned last month that you were concerned about your team's morale. How has that evolved since you implemented the changes we discussed? This demonstrates not only that you listen, but that you retain and value what others share. It transforms communication from transactional exchanges into an ongoing dialogue. When I consciously implemented conversational threading, the depth and quality of my professional relationships improved dramatically. People began sharing more significant insights and opportunities because they recognized I was genuinely engaged. The ninth element of this technique involves what behavioral economists call loss aversion. Humans feel the pain of loss more acutely than the pleasure of equivalent gain. By occasionally and authentically highlighting the unique value you provide, value that can't be easily replaced, you activate this powerful psychological principle. This isn't about threatening to withdraw or playing games. It's about gently reminding others of the specific benefits your relationship provides. I've enjoyed being the person you can bounce these ideas off of. My perspective as someone outside your industry seems to give you a different angle. You're not saying you'll withdraw this value, you're simply bringing awareness to it. I used this approach when a consulting relationship was becoming unnecessarily formal and distant. By casually referencing the unique value I brought, one thing I've noticed is that our informal brainstorming sessions tend to generate the most innovative solutions. I received an immediate shift in engagement and a renewed appreciation for our working relationship. The 10th component of this technique involves strategic vulnerability. Note the word strategic. I'm not suggesting you indiscriminately share your deepest insecurities. Rather, I'm talking about selectively sharing challenges or uncertainties in a way that invites connection rather than burdening others. Most people either overshare, creating discomfort, or present an impenetrable facade, creating distance. The middle path, thoughtfully sharing appropriate vulnerabilities, creates opportunities for genuine connection. I'm working through a difficult decision about this project. I'm torn between the efficient approach and what I believe would create more long-term value. I'd appreciate your perspective when you have time. When I incorporated strategic vulnerability into my communication, something remarkable happened. People who had previously been formal and guarded began sharing their own challenges and seeking my input. By demonstrating that I trusted them with my genuine thoughts, I created space for reciprocal trust. Now let's address timing, perhaps the most underappreciated aspect of effective communication. It's not just what you say or how you say it, it's when you say it. Different people have different optimal times for communication and decision-making. By observing and respecting these patterns, you dramatically increase your effectiveness. I noticed that a key business contact never responded to afternoon messages, but was highly responsive early in the morning. Rather than taking his afternoon silence personally, I adjusted my communication timing. The result? Our interaction frequency doubled, and the quality of our exchanges improved because I was reaching him when he was most receptive. The 11th element builds on everything we've discussed. It's what I call value stacking. Each interaction should ideally provide multiple forms of value simultaneously. Perhaps you're sharing information, intellectual value, while also acknowledging an achievement, emotional value, and suggesting a resource that saves time, practical value. When you consistently stack value in your communications, you become the person others are eager to hear from because every interaction leaves them better off in multiple dimensions. I implemented this with my professional network by ensuring that each contact point provided at least 3 forms of value. The response was immediate. My callback rate increased dramatically because people associated my communications with multifaceted benefit. Now let's talk about what might be the most powerful aspect of this entire technique: the strategic use of sincere appreciation. Not flattery, not manipulation, but genuine recognition of specific qualities or contributions you value in others. Most people feel chronically underappreciated, and when you can address that need authentically, you create a powerful connection. The key is specificity and sincerity. I appreciate your thoughtfulness is nice but generic. I've noticed that you consistently consider how decisions affect the entire team, not just your department. That kind of systems thinking is rare and incredibly valuable, is specific and meaningful. When I began practicing this form of specific appreciation, the quality of my professional relationships transformed. People weren't just responsive, they were engaged on a deeper level. This brings us to another critical element, what I call future casting. This involves subtly establishing the assumption of continued interaction. Rather than asking if you'll speak again, you naturally reference when. The next time we connect, I'd be interested to hear how the project evolved, assumes continuation without demanding it. The power of this approach lies in its subtlety. You're not pushing for commitment, you're expressing genuine interest in the ongoing story. When I implemented future casting in my communications, I noticed something fascinating. People began to reference our next conversation unprompted, mirroring the assumption of continuity I had established. Now, let's address a question that might be forming in your mind. Isn't this a lot of work? Do I really need to think about communication this deeply? The answer depends on how much you value meaningful connection. Yes, thoughtful communication requires effort, but so does anything worthwhile. Think about it this way. We invest time in learning skills for our careers, in maintaining our physical health, in pursuing hobbies, yet many of us expect profound connection to happen automatically without deliberate attention or development. The technique I'm sharing requires practice and intention, but the return on that investment is immeasurable. When I first began implementing these principles, it felt awkward and overly analytical, but like any skill with practice, it became natural. Now I don't consciously think through each element. They've become integrated into how I communicate. The results speak for themselves. Deeper connections, more meaningful opportunities, and yes, people who consistently reach out and want to engage. The 13th component of this technique involves what psychologists call reciprocal self-disclosure. Relationships deepen through the gradual mutual sharing of increasingly significant thoughts, feelings, and experiences. By thoughtfully managing the pace and depth of what you share, you create a natural rhythm of growing connection.